This is a very positive sign. I've heard chit-chatter. I couldn't raise my voice high enough. And I just know we're going to have a terrific meeting. And when I ask for comments and people tell me they got nothing to say, I won't believe a word because I've seen you in action. Okay? And nice to be here. It's an area of the province I don't get to as often as I should, especially since I am no longer running the roads. And those of you who know about politicians, you know how they can run the roads. And I used to spend some time up here visiting our good friends, the late Dr. and Jean Dorr, wonderful people. Lived in the doctor's house down here in Main Street. And I guess it was in the early 80s when Robert Henderson's dad went to Ottawa, in my mind unexpectedly, but he knew he was going. And there was a by-election called, and so the provincial candidate thought they would come up here and help the local candidate. And I was assigned to the northern pole to canvass it from one end to the other. I came up in 2 or 3 days in a row to do that. And as I told my later friend Keith Milliken, from what I could see, the only effect I had in the northern pole, it increased the Liberal majority from the previous election. In any event, I've met some of you before, and I've met some of you for the first time. And thank you for coming. I realize that this is an adjourned, postponed date because of weather. And if you look carefully in today's paper, you'll see the balance of the list of places where we're going. And just might start off and make a few little announcements. So I've met so far with the Federation of Agriculture, spoke at their annual meeting, and meeting with the NFU on April the 11th at their annual meeting, having a meeting next week with a group that should be very interesting, the young farmers age 18 to 40, and also meeting later in the month with the PEI's Crop Soil Association. And we have met in Montague, Vernon, Morel, now in O'Leary, next Wednesday meeting in Crapo, Thursday in Wellington, and then on Tuesday the 26th in Alberton Town Hall in the evening from 7 to 9. Summerside, the Loyola's Inn the next night, the 27th. The Rod Charlottetown Hotel on Kent Street the following night, the 28th. Going to Surrey on March the 4th. The Kensington Legion on March the 6th. Kincora on the Thursday, March the 14th, 7 to 9. Then there's a break there. We have school break. Going to do a makeup for North Rustico because of the storm on Monday, March 25th, the Lions Club. And going to Murray Harbour Community Centre on Tuesday, March the 26th. On the way coming in, there are a few little papers there. There are a few maps, and you can read there about the maps, so that we may, depending upon how it goes, get into looking at those maps a little bit. There is a business card that if you'd like to telephone me, if you'd like to send me an email, or you'd like to send me a letter, I'd be more than welcome to hear from you. The terms of reference is the long sheet of paper. And I'm just going to take a moment and read a couple of those terms of reference. This is the inquiry that was set up by the Executive Council. They called for people that were interested in being the Commissioner of Inquiry under the Lands Protection Act and Public Inquiries Act to apply for the position. I applied for the position last September before we went on holidays, and came back and found out that I had been appointed to do this. So just looking at the long sheet of paper, supposed to do an inquiry to examine, inquire, and report the Lands Protection Act concerning 4 points. 1 is the adequacy of existing agricultural land holding limits, given changes in agriculture, provincial land use, and ownership trends in rural communities. 2, options for reducing red tape and regulatory requirements while ensuring that the Act can be effectively administered and enforced. 3. Legislative concerns that have arisen involving such issues as land holding limits as they apply to utilities, application thresholds as they apply to multiple owners, and the information and deeming requirements for nonprofit corporations. And 4, any other matter the Commissioner deems appropriate to review and bring to the attention of Executive Council. So, what are the terms of reference? Well, 3 of them are rather specific, and 4 is? Why don't we? And my style that I wanted to do, even though this has been technically empowered under the Public Inquiries Act, we are not going in that formal way unless something happens over the next couple of months that requires a little bit more formality. But what I wanted to do was to have as many meetings across the province as possible and to go into areas so that people would have the opportunity to come and to make their comments known, and sometimes even just to listen. The recording, the mics here are to record. We're not using any amplification today because there's a really good sound situation in the room. We can hear each other. The recordings do take place, and they will be online, and so people can listen to them even though they're not here. So what I would like to do is just read one more piece of paper, and then we'll actually hear from you. When the Lands Protection Act was put in 1982, it was the result of many years of piecemeal legislation that exists in this province going back about 150 years. And in 1982 was the McLean government, of which I was a member, and Premier McLean, as a result of a report of the Legislative Assembly and Agriculture that brought in 18 recommendations, and they recommended for people who are residents of the province 1,000 acres of land, and that included leased land. If you were 3 equal shareholders in a corporation, it was 3,000 acres, and that was put through in the Lands Protection Act of 1982. Now, Prime Minister Trudeau, he decided to bring the Charter of Rights and Freedoms back from Britain, and in the first draft of the Rights and Charters Freedoms, it said that everyone had the right to own property across the country. This province took a strong position against that, and we were successful in convincing him and some other premiers to take it out, and as a result of that, the jurisdiction of Prince Edward Island, along with other provinces to own and control land laws, existed again. Some may think that was a mistake. Others would say that thank you for having done that, because if that hadn't happened, there'd be no Lands Protection Act. No Lands Protection Act, nobody here this afternoon. Okay. In 1998, the then government made an amendment to the Lands Protection Act. There had been numerous amendments to this legislation over 30 years. In 1982, a farmer that was incorporated could simply indicate in the deed that they were a farming corporation, and they didn't have to go to IRAC, they didn't go to Executive Council, as long as they were in allowable limits. They didn't have to do any of that type of situation whatsoever. Over time, significant amendments have happened that have changed all of that. And there's much more paperwork, and there is much more requirements for resident corporate farms to have that happen. More paperwork indeed. But in 1998, a purpose was put in the statute. And it's unusual for a purpose to be stated right in the statute, but this is what the purpose says. The purpose of this act is to provide for the regulation of property rights in Prince Edward Island, especially the amount of land that may be held by a person or corporation. This act has been enacted in recognition that Prince Edward Island faces singular challenges with regard to property rights as a result of several circumstances, including A, historical difficulties with absentee landowners, and the consequent problems faced by the inhabitants of Prince Edward Island in governing their own affairs, both public and private. The province's small land area and comparatively high population density unique among the provinces of Canada, and the fragile nature of the province's ecology, environment, and lands, and the resultant need for the exercise of prudent, balanced, and steadfast stewardship to ensure the protection of the land's ecology, environment, and lands. So anyway, enough from me. Look forward to hearing from you. I was here a little early, so I had the opportunity to speak to those of you who came a little bit before 2:30, and I will stay until the last of you are here. In Montague the other evening, I ended up speaking with everybody afterwards, and then I looked around and I said, well, they're still socializing, so I left. So anyway, it's a nice afternoon. Thank you for coming, and perhaps someone would like to make their comments known. And here's the other thing I should say. I will be probably asking some questions. I don't want anyone to take from my question an indication of what you think I'm thinking. Okay? People come to lawyers for answers. Quite often, they get a lot of questions. So I might say something to Ronnie McWilliams, and, Carver's thinking this. Okay? But then if I look at Richard Goro, I may ask him different questions. He's changed his mind. The purpose is for me to gain information. There'll be perhaps one or two instances, depending upon your comments, that I will indicate something and more or less where I am thinking something, but that'll be very rare. Very rare. So, who wishes to be the first brave soul? The other night in Montague was someone in the front row.
This guy has no opinion.
Well, apparently your friends in the room think you do. Well, let's, since everybody is not going to immediately jump to the podium, let's go to an area where there seems to be a little bit of consensus. And that is that there is, and for me to read, I have to have my glasses, take them on and off, so that's sort of the game of the red tape. There seems to be, and forget that the minister is here. Look, I'm telling you, you know the ministers come and go, even members come and go. I know that. He's here this afternoon. Whatever you want to say, just say it. And
It's never stopped them before.
Never stopped them before. Well, that's good, Robert. But red tape means a lot of things to different people. But if I'm hearing, and I'm hearing a whole bunch of things, but if I'm hearing one thing consistently is that there's an awful lot of paper and there's an awful lot of time that farmers have to deal with accountants and with lawyers and processing. And so anyway, I'd love to hear your examples, your opinions. Let's start that one. That should be okay.
Could you just talk a little bit about the process of having your non-farmable land set like it really doesn't count as agricultural, but apparently it's almost a bureaucratic brick wall to have land exempt from your limit sort of thing.
Okay. A few years ago, it was suggested that there were some farmlands that just weren't capable of being farmed, and why should that be counted? And in fact, the Federation, one gentleman indicated, well, look at me. I have so much as woodland and wetland, this, that, and everything else, but my neighbor hasn't got anything like that. So what they did is they put a process in place, and it's only been there a short period of time. And I'm going to tell you what happened at the Federation. And I asked in the room how many people felt that they owned land that qualified for wetlands and slopelands and all of that type of stuff. And I'd say, Bertha Campbell, president here, and John Jameson is here, the executive director of Federation. I would say, just reading of it, maybe 35 or 40 hands went up, okay, that they qualified. And so then I said, how many people have made application. And I didn't count them, but I would say 5 or 6 max. Okay? And Mr. Henderson's colleague was there, Mr. Sheraton, and I said, okay, Minister, look, you passed the regulation, nobody's used it, so the regulation is not effective. Why? And it became abundantly clear that farmers thought the process was too cumbersome. This is the process, Peter. You have to fill out an application with some geolinks and stuff like that. And for me, that mightn't sound very difficult, get a geolink, but it's not as easy for people to get geolinks as they think, okay? So you get the geolink map, fill out the application, then it goes off to IRAC. IRAC gets the application, then they send it down to the main part of government, agriculture, environment, and they have a little look around, look at the paper, and then somebody has to go out and cite. They have a look at the situation. They do a report back, goes back to IRAC. IRAC then determines how much of it should be exempted, the request. Then it goes to Executive Council. Executive Council makes a decision. Now, I'm just going to read a little bit from some stuff here that qualifies for the exempted lands. Designated wetlands. It would be forestry. It would be lands that are used as buffers. Marginal land, that planting trees, some land that has to be utilized as an erosion control structure. Permanent grassed headland, and then hedgerows. And so for 1,000 acres, it's up to 40%. So that's 400 acres. For a corporation of 3,000 equal shareholders, it's 1,200 acres. So that would be that. And then there's one little bit more on this, and that is that no more than 80% of the exempted land can be forested. So of the 1,000 acres, 400 can be exempted. Then there's 80% of the 40% that can't be exempted. And while I understand that, I can also tell you that as a lawyer, when you hear things such as, this is what it can be, and then this is the exemption, and that's what it can be, and then the exemption itself can only be a certain amount. Guys, it ain't the way to have regulations understood in an easy sense, but if people are working with them, okay? Now, I've heard enough comments at the meetings, privately, before and after the meetings, to indicate that farmers are not that keen on having government people appear in their lands. Okay? I made the suggestion at the Morel meeting, would things be better if there was a group of retired farmers that would assess the situation, go out and have a look and see whether they're qualified or not. And there seemed to be a lot of support for that, particularly from the brother of a chap who said his older brother was thinking of retiring next year or so, and that would give his brother a part-time job. Okay. But my point is very simple, very simple. If there is merit in the regulation, and I have it on reasonably good information that the 40% could have easily been 30%, 40%, 50%, or whatever. There wasn't perhaps any scientific reason for that. But my point is on that. If it was worthwhile to go down that road, it needs to be utilized and needs to be a benefit to the farmers it was intended for, and so far that hasn't been the case. Apologize for the long, but you're not going to trick me again with another long answer later. I want comments from you guys.
And that was a couple of years ago.
It was, Greg. It was a couple of years ago.
But the moral of the story is it was a great idea and should have happened, but it got lost.
Well, I think the moral of the story, without being disrespectful, and do we have media here today? Okay. I saw one fellow back there with a notebook, but he tells me he's taking an environmental assessment course at Holland College, so I'm more relaxed. Okay. And I said this openly the other day. TV cameras were at the Federation, the minister was there and everything else. And I just say that there was something wrong, and I think the minister got the point because I could see his head nodding, is that a regulation that is meant to help and meant to assist is no help and no assistance if it ain't being utilized in a manner that people feel as if it's helpful. In fact, what it's done, I think, has sort of, by a lot of farmers, said, I'm not going to do it because I think I'm going to get in more trouble than otherwise. And are we saying farmers are dishonest? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that they have had some experience in the past that they don't like government people on their lands.
I think that there's only been, and Albert, you can correct me, but 9 to 10,000 acres.
Yeah, John,
Not that many.
the exemption has been, it's one of my shocks is that and I don't have that particular piece of paper here today, but it's one of my shocks that it has been so low in the application. Especially, and you also have to remember as well, that for example, the Island Nature Trust, which was very close to its maximum of 3,000 acres, they made the application. And now the amount of acres that is not exempted for them is way down because, so that would be part of the process as well.
And then you take another farm that I know that has the 1,200 acres
Yeah.
exempted out, so you take those two
That's
examples,
right.
there's not a whole lot of.
And the farm that he's talking about is some of the people in the blueberry industry, they have publicly stated this to me that they got 1,200 acres exempted out. Okay. So now that you've got me to provide that long whatever, what do you think about the regulation, Peter?
Well, like it really doesn't involve me, but just watching the community, the farming community, I think that it should be made, it has to be made to work.
That's right.
I wonder if it would alleviate some of the drive for the acreage limits to be increased. Not that I have a problem with the acreage limits being increased. Look, this is a pretty wide-ranging question in this province. It has a lot to do with the health of our communities. Is there going to be any kids in our schools west of Summerside? Or is there going to be any churches, hospitals? It all revolves around the use of our best and probably only resource, that being the land. What is the best way to use the land in this province?
I think one of the things you're dealing with is relationship between the governing body and the farmers. The farmers don't trust the governing body. The governing body comes across as being the only thing they're interested in is to try and win the farmer where he's done wrong. All the farmers are trying to do is make a living. And because of that, they say, we're not going to get involved in it. We'll do what we have to do to make it work.
Yeah. See, Richard, if there's one thing that became apparent to me in this process as we got underway, is what you just said is a widely held opinion. My observation before I had my first public meeting was this, that the actual mechanics of making some of this thing happen, people were having some problems with the paper. Where do you go to get the map, the geolink, and all that type of stuff? And as I said a moment ago, for me that's pretty simple. My secretary presses the button, runs it off, and that's it. Okay. But it became apparent, and so I suggested at the Vernon River meeting that maybe what would happen on a Saturday afternoon, we'd have some government people come and sit down and help people fill out the applications and do this and do that. Well, I was promptly told by one farmer, who I know reasonably well, who's not here today, that they could do that themselves, that they didn't need government people coming out to fill out the forms. But that the real issue was what you just said, Richard. That was the real issue. Which, I got to tell you guys, that really bothers me even more so, because what that goes to is a lack of trust. Okay? And I've been in this business a long time as a lawyer, and even longer interested in the political affairs of this province. I don't own any land. I don't own any company that owns land. My wife owns half an acre of land, and that's her home in Charlottetown. But I know that the most important thing to make relationships tick, to marriage is successful, and even business and farming operations work, is trust. And somewhere along the line, on this issue, trust has been diminished in relationship between the farmers and governments. I'm not talking about one particular government, Robbie. I'm talking about governments. And so somehow we need to sort of build that. That's why my suggestion in morale was half serious and full earnest. If we have a regulation, would you feel comfortable, Richard and others, that like this, that instead of governmental people coming out to assess whether this was wetland, slopeland, whatever, that some of your colleagues or former colleagues could make that assessment?
Well, I guess, speaking personally, I have to
Yes.
understand just what all is involved in that. Like, there's a whole host of issues, not just around land use, but also other issues that farmers struggle with every day. And because of that, we tend to stay within what we do and make it work. And a lot of times it costs us a lot of dollars to make that happen. What I'm interested in, I've been in this game way too long, but
Well, I asked you your age, but you wouldn't tell me. You said it was too many years.
it's I remember when a large farm was 30 acres of potatoes. I was proud of that. I worked with, when we had three different families. I've always been proud of a family farm. But it's these things get ushered in. The red tape and all those things, it's counterproductive. But if we could, first of all, if we could identify what is the purpose of this law in the first place. Is it beneficial to the economy of PEI? Is it beneficial to farmers? And is it beneficial to keeping young people, especially in West Prince? We need drastically to encourage our young people to stay in the farm. And there's not many who have the fortitude or the energy to try and do that. So we need these young people desperately. So every time you have a law or a red tape, that just helps to keep that, because it's all cost, and we're working today at very low margins, and so we need to make this as easy as possible for young people. For instance, if you have a company, you get 3 shareholders. If you want 3,000, if you need 3,000 acres to do the job that you're doing, and you take a young person in, he has to have, right out of the bat, he has to have a third share in that company, in that farm. There's only one way that's going to happen, is you give them. And I don't personally have a problem with that, but some may or not. So, and then another thing that may happen is somebody might run over me, and then all of a sudden you're going to get 2 shareholders. What are you going to do? We sell the farm. That's some of the things that this law has created. And so how do you deal with that aspect of this law? Like, we really need young people. So let's make it easy for them. Like, you asked me the question we talked personally, what's the number? Well, I get no magic number there, but make it easy enough that young people can become part of that farm situation.
I think the gentleman with the green hat a long time ago was trying to make a comment.
you
Your
guys
name,
say-
please?
Like, you're gonna look for retired farmers to do the exempt land, right? Why wouldn't you hire a young person right out of school that's studying this stuff? But you think that hiring a friend or a colleague would be biased, compared to hiring a student or a younger person? And
I'm
you
just
say-
trying to make the suggestion that we could find someone that the farmers would trust, that would work. That's all that would happen. But if the person is immature of the age, if they're qualified and they know what they're doing and don't bring the ring of government with them, I think that might be all right. Ronnie McWilliams, you were trying to say something a moment ago. Is it directly on what Richard is saying right now? Or are we going to go to
Prior
John?
to that, with government, trust in government employees and stuff.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you in a second. I'm not serious. But I know that you'll be available at short notice all afternoon. I've known Ronnie McWilliams come across him a couple of times over the years. John, we're going to see what you have to say for a moment.
Just following up on what Richard was saying, We have a lot of farmers that are 55, 56 years old, that's the average age. But on these farms, we have a lot of shareholders that are quite elderly. And yesterday I made a call on behalf of a farm to Iraq, and they have a father who's equal shareholder who's deteriorating in his mental capacity quite quickly. The other two boys have to buy this, and I say boys, they're only in their 50s, have to buy the shareholder out. There's nothing in the Act that allows a period of time for them to bring someone in as a shareholder, from what I hear from Iraq.
Not yet.
They sort of give them 6 months or so grace, but I think that's something that really needs to be looked at, that there's a period of time that someone can, that allows a farm to orderly transition from having 3 shareholders, all of a sudden, having 2 and then having to bring someone in. Or is there some other mechanism that you don't have to bring a young person in as a full shareholder, because there is some discomfort with that too.
This is a complicated area, and it's an area that I'm going to have to spend a fair bit of time thinking and working at. But I can guarantee you it will be addressed in the report. If you just think that the spread of 30 years, a person who was 50 to 55 30 years ago and they're still farming is now 80 or 85. And they may be mentally healthy and alert, but unfortunately not all are. And then if the person dies, then Iraq is able to give them some flexibility and so forth. Part of the problem there, John, is that estates are becoming even more complicated. And there used to be an old rule when I first started practicing law. They call it the executor's year, 1 year to get things tidied up. Some of these estates and farm estate situations, there's no way you can do it in 1 year, 2 years, perhaps even 3 years. I used to at one time practice law in the area of family law until one day after a court case I just said, I've had heck enough of this. It's a tough area too, because then you've got to deal with sons and daughters, you get marriages, you get prenups. We do have divorces in this province and country and all that type of stuff. It's very complicated, and in many ways what's going to be required here is to try to produce recommendations that will try to cover various situations. And it's going to be tough, but to give, and I'm not taking anything away from young people, really. We have 2 sons in their 20s, but there are lots of good reasons why somebody age 18 or 19 shouldn't be given 1/3 equal voting rights with all assets in the business. Anyway. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that?
Great.
How has that been dealt with to this point? This situation that was described? Because I'm sure it's occurred over the last number of years.
Oh, I suspect, Greg, there's been some very interesting arrangements.
Okay. Yeah, there's been arrangements. Now, Iraq has told me that they kind of turn a blind eye for a period of time. But there's really there's no regulation, there's nothing there that really protects the farmer. But there's been, like you say, some creative arrangements that have cost people a lot of money too.
I guess, as far as
Sorry.
it strikes me that you failed to ask the first question that I think needs to be asked is does there need to be limits? Is there need to be any of this bureaucracy there?
Well,
Richard said about opening up. I mean, that's an option whereby all what you just discussed over the last 20 minutes is irrelevant. If the act has become redundant, is there really a need of having land limits? Should that not be the first question?
Well, it's certainly a question. I don't think it should be the first question, because I was trying to get a little bit of chit-chat going and a little bit of laughter and some friendliness going in the room before I went to where we would never be going to.
Sorry, I had to cut this.
That's the difference in the lawyer and the farmer. Farmer's got to get it done.
Ronnie, we'll hear from you in about an hour's time. Peter?
Aren't we all saying the same thing?
I don't know. We are not. Well, I don't know what meeting you've been at.
What do we need to do to make the best use of our resource? Like Richard spoke about keeping the young people, especially in West Prince, he said it, and I think that's...
I don't think you can limit that comment. I appreciate where Richard's coming from, but I don't think that comment can be limited to West Prince.
Well,
It's wide across.
But yeah, I think we all agree that we know what he means, and I think it's the same as what I'm saying. And what Ron is saying is, how is having no limits the best way to accomplish that? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe we need a higher study to determine how this resource can be used to spread the wealth or create more wealth. Do we think that we can? Are there people that think we can, if releasing the limits will allow us to compete with Idaho and Manitoba for large volumes of moderate value product? We turn the few entrepreneurs we got left into minimum wage workers for the least number of people.
Well, first of all, the question you asked starting off, I think, is an extraordinarily important question. What is good for our land? Okay. And in my spontaneous debate with the Prime Minister now 30 plus years ago, as I sat beside Peter Lougheed in Ottawa, I said, Alberta will eventually have no oil. Okay. We have 15 inches of topsoil, and if we manage it and take care of it, it can produce and go on for centuries. It really can. I hear people saying they just want to have it wide open. Actually, there are fewer of those people than I thought there might be. I hear other people saying, well, we need to have more, this and that, and so forth. And then I heard, surprisingly, a couple of farmers say, you got to be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Okay? And I'll just make this observation, a couple of observations here. One of the reasons I am trying to have as many hearings as I am and trying to make the structure as informal as I can is that we might learn enough about other people's opinions to have a greater understanding and appreciation of other people walking in different shoes, and yet we're all in the same community. Now, I may fall flat on my face on this, but during 14 meetings, I'm trying as hard as I possibly can to get people to voice opinions and let other people hear and express them. Okay. One of the concerns that I have in this whole matter of the world that we live in, because I hear things where we're competing against the world, Idaho and all that type of stuff is that. And we have a few wealthy families in Prince Darwin. But guys, we have no comprehension at all of the volume of billions of dollars that exists in this world that is looking for places to invest and to buy land in safe, politically stable environments. And if farmers who, in the agricultural industry, and I'll pick up on potatoes a little bit because they seem to be getting the brunt of this, they need more land and so forth. But there are some existing rules and regulations out there in a strange way. You mightn't like the act, but it makes it that the people that are trying to buy land here and from elsewhere, it has to be advertised for a period of time, have had the opportunity to publicize it. But if people think that those billions of dollars that exist throughout this world aren't going to come in short notice to PI to buy up our land, then I think people have come to an erroneous conclusion. And once the land is gone, as a result of billions of dollars paid for it, it might be so easy to get that land back into agricultural production. Ronnie, I may need your help.
Yeah,
I produce silence.
you've raised more questions,
Oh, really?
the concerns. This here about government, am I allowed to speak now?
Yes, Ronnie, you're allowed to speak. I punched
I
you
brought
up.
an environmental person onto my property to see, well, there's tile drainage there, I should dig out the end of it. Probably I better check and see if I need a permit to dig it out, so, da-da-da. Well, in the course of the action, this environmental person got her feet wet walking through the bulrushes. Then she said I had to get a permit in order to go in the woods to get my firewood out. So that's what one thing can lead to another, right? So I had a permit for November and December to go and get my wood. The act, with the enforcement of this act, there's a lot of when it was put in place, it was to protect the landowners, the islanders from non-residents. Non-residents own them. And yes, you can go the acreage at that time. There was a big corporation going to buy up and grow all the potatoes, and things had been put in place in order to stop them. But there's another issue there too, and that's our shore frontage. How many? I mean, the thing is there, but how much of our shore frontage is owned by non-residents who come here, and there may have been a road down for our local people to get to the beach, and these new non-resident landowners have said, you're not going there anymore. And government put in place the regulations that you could only buy so much, and it had to be approved. And I think
Okay, well let's
great.
stop. Let's stop right there. Did everybody get these maps?
Yep.
Okay. And did you get the little analysis with it? Okay. All right. Carry on, Ronnie.
But that was to protect us islanders from the people from away, and for our families that had to move away so they could come back and they could still have access to some of the properties. And right now, like in one of the jobs I got now is the Rural Fire District Committee, and we have fire dues now issued to non-residents even if there's no buildings on the properties, for the simple fact that if they come here, they want service. If they put up a tent and have a grass fire and endanger the fellow next door, they can't wait until they have a fire for us to go and buy a fire truck. So we build them now.
And is that okay with you?
Yeah, I'm the chairman of the committee.
Okay.
And we haven't had anybody request it back yet.
Okay.
And with regard to some of this legal work too, which is stated there before, permits and all this stuff, how long does it take? Like if you got to go through accountants and lawyers, they're forever. And it's, us farmers used to we got to do something, we got to go and do it. We can't take 6 months down the road to get a reply. But anyway, that's just and I'm involved in the Westgate Wind Farm out there, and my theory is we get in under the wire. But any wind farm now, they're coming in under a lot of scrutiny. And yes, I own the land, but I've got to have community approval before we can do anything with it.
Actually, I remember you quite well from those meetings.
And, when you look at down east, I mean, the last letter in the paper, the fellow, he didn't say where he was from. He had 68 acres. He was going to sell it for a penny because if they put the windmills up, it was going to be worth nothing. But these people, there are even people in our area that moved away 50 years ago, and they come back 7 years ago, and they think that everything should be the way it was 50 years ago, and they don't want the windmills. And yet the rest of us stayed here and slugged it out and made a living and kept the environment going. And they don't want us to have a little bit of money for nothing. And it's kind of sad that way. And these people down east, how much in Hermanville, wherever it's at, how much would that contribute to the economy of the communities?
I think since we're in O'Leary, I think we'll leave Hermanville alone this afternoon.
No. You've talked about Morel and Montague and everything else, so it's
Carry on, talk about Hermanville.
we're a 1 million acre farm. And, farmers are getting less and less say in what they can do. Now, you asked me earlier, do you think there should be an increase in limit? I'm retiring, I'm renting my land there, but things have changed in the 30 years. Back 30 years ago, like Ron said, or Peter or Ron, a small dairy farmer, there was 500 dairy farmers in PEI. Now there's 198, and with producing the same amount of milk. And people have to get bigger to be able to be more efficient. And yes, I think the limits are going to have to be increased. By how much? 25, 50% or something? But you can't open it wide open. You still have to keep the controls on the coastline to protect our own for Robbie to sell us for tourism. So, there still has to be some restrictions in there, some controls that islanders can control and not going to be controlled by non-residents.
The legislation that was put in the Lands Protection Act in 1982 was taking some various pieces of legislation that Alec Campbell had put in place and making it more expanded. And for the first time ever, placing restrictions of individuals what they could own in Prince Edward Island. In 1981, it was possible for an individual islander to own more than 1,000 acres. But by the Act in 82, it was a maximum resident province. Resident in this province, 1,000 acres, 3 for the 3 shareholders. And one of the things that, to my mind, Ronnie, has surprisingly come up very little in the meeting so far has been the matter of non-resident ownership of land. And because it's one of the points of the terms of reference in the statute.
I go back to the Senate, too.
Well, since you want to talk about Hermanville, simply let me say the same thing I said to 2 friends of mine that appeared the other night in the front row of Montague, and they started making similar comments. You can try and beat me all you want, but I'm not talking about the residency and relates to the Senate, Ronnie. So we're going to move on then.
Well, no, I guess that was just referring to...
I know what you're referring to.
No, to the precedent, to the idea of a resident.
Well, the definition of a resident in the Lands Protection Act is someone who spends 183 days here. It doesn't say 183 consecutive days. And it also makes the situation that if you can come here, and if you don't even need qualification don't even need approval, if you're less than 5 acres of land, less than 165 feet along the water. So my wife and I, we were non-residents. We could get basically 10 acres and 330 feet along the water without becoming qualified or required to get the permit. If you need to get a permit for an excess of that, then you have to go through a process. And you want to hear about that, I can talk about it before the meeting is over. But there are some existing ways now that people have used to avoid going through Iraq. They were not intended to do that when the statute was put in place in 82, but lawyers and accountants are asked to fulfill clients' wishes. I don't get up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to do this and do that, because somebody wants me to do something to achieve something. And if it's possible to use the statute in such a manner that certain things can happen, then it's lawful and it's legal. And some of these situations need to sort of be examined again. There's no question about it because it has been 30 years. That doesn't take away from Ron Maynard's question of whether we need the statute in the first place, and it perhaps doesn't address some of the things that Richard Gorel was talking about, and it doesn't talk about what's good for our land. But somewhere along the line we need to answer that question, what is good for our land.
So why do we have that double standard?
Which?
Even back in 82.
What double standard?
Where non-residents didn't have to apply. But yet agriculture, which is the backbone of our economy here in Prince Edward Island, we are required to basically do everything and around disclosure
But
to
let,
accomplish what it is that we're trying to do at the farm gate.
well, we'll come back. I really don't think there was a double standard in 82 on that point. I honestly really don't. Perhaps if I could go back a little bit, you know the history of the land laws in this province way back and tenant farms, you know all of that. And there was the law in this province that if you were an alien or a foreigner of Canada, you could buy up to 200 acres in this province without getting executive council approval. And then in the 60s, that was reduced to 10 acres of land. And then in the early 70s, the Campbell government came along and they changed that to include corporations and so forth. So that the statute in 1982 simply did the 10 acres for non-residents, 330 feet along water. And then when it came, it said the corporations, whether they were non-resident shareholders or island resident shareholders, then you needed to apply, except if you were a farming corporation. And if you were a farming corporation, you didn't need to apply. That was clearly dealt with in the McLean government's legislation and regulations. But time went on, and I left public office in 86. A small majority of 184 in my constituency wanted me to practice law full time. After that, some various changes happened. And in the early 90s, I was retained by the first Premier Giz to do certain things pertaining to the Land Protection Act, about a fact situation that exists in the province. And some of those things came down to whether Corporation A was truly a farm corporation or not. Okay. And the legislature in the late 80s and early 90s amended certain things. And while we can criticize that it's produced more paper, there were policy reasons at the time why those things happened. So I don't think there was a double standard when it came through. I guess the point that I would make a little bit is that the paperwork seems to have become voluminous. The whole matter of identification of your properties, and there's a whole bunch of things that I think farmers don't understand or haven't had properly explained to them. And if they had known these things, that it could have made other things would make it easier. And I apologize for the length of that answer.
I'll have to speak to that. I think probably farmers do understand, and I think in a lot of cases they just don't go to express everything with our government. Because sometimes, just like what Ronnie had spoken about, there are things that we get entrapped by. And I guess what I came here today, I wanted to hear what the options were.
Yeah.
And I don't want to belabor this point, but I guess as I look back on it, we do have to be very careful with what we do. We only have one island, but we have to be very smart about what we do with it.
Absolutely.
Because it's the only resource that we have.
Absolutely.
But as I look at some of the legislation that has been passed in the last few years, whether it be Crop Rotation Act that hasn't really been followed, but would seriously influence what is happening around our properties. As we, as farmers, try to remain viable, I guess, some of these issues will have to be looked at very carefully.
Okay. And I know you took exception to my point that I thought the farmers didn't understand a couple of things. And I want to give you an example of that. You incorporate your farm and you buy some land. It's going to be identified. It's just going to be identified. That's what's going to happen. You get your IRAC approval. Okay? But how many farmers in this room realize that they could give notice of termination of that identification that will take effect 11 years from the time that you got your deed? And how many farmers do it?
So what does that mean?
So you want to show hands? Or?
Sure. You know that. Okay. So you're 2 out of 35. Okay. And what does it mean? It means at the time that the identification is put in place, that if you give notice of termination, you can't give notice of termination until the first year anniversary of the date of the identification going in the first place. So after the first year goes by, then in 10 more years' time, the identification is gone. Okay? And we're hearing a fair number of complaints and criticisms about the identification and de-identification process. Well, 10 years goes by like a flip a moment. Whether 10 years is the correct amount, whether it should be 20 or 5, I don't know. That's the example I was making. I fully understand and I have accepted the point that farmers don't want government people on their properties, and so I understand that. I've had numerous examples of that. But the point I was making was on my last point.
No, I heard you.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I also take exception to in relation to
And what's your first name?
Dent Mills
Okay.
is in relation to current laws whereby you had mentioned in your opening remarks like an individual's 1,000 acres of
Yes.
leased land. I know at the time when I was doing my reporting back a while ago, they don't subtract anything that is leased back out. And that can create situations where you can be outside the law and you don't even realize you're outside the law because you may be trading with others until you start reporting. And I guess one of the things that I wonder around this little room is how many existing farmers are actually even reporting what it is that they hold. Because they may have not found themselves in a situation where they had to go before IRAC to get approval on anything.
Well,
And as a result, may be guilty.
well, it's not for me to
You're not
determine.
looking for a show of hands on that, are you?
Well, John, if they want a show of hands, I'll have to go to the car and get my sunglasses. Well, we're not using the words guilty in these proceedings. It's not a criminal court. And people are giving me some piece of information, and I am storing them in my mind and using them as examples and so forth. There have been various changes over the years in Iraq. And first of all, I don't feel that my job was to justify the existing status quo in this. I don't think that's what the Executive Council asked me to do. I think Executive Council gave me wide open carte blanche to look at things, and if there's any doubt, you can just read paragraph 4. That, at one time, this is how Iraq even counted acres, okay? That John Handrahan and I own 100 acres together, okay? And then I report that I own with Handrahan 100 acres. So you think that you would put down 50 acres for Carver and 50 for Handrahan. But that wasn't the way Iraq looked at it. I had a half of an undivided whole, so therefore I had a half undivided interest in the whole, so therefore I had 100 acres. And John Handrahan had the same thing. And as one local wit said, not to be confused with someone who just had half as much wit, but he said, well, therefore there must be 200 acres. No, Iraq says there's only 100 acres, but you report 100, you report 100, okay? Well, anyway, at some point in time a few years ago, they said, no, that type of counting was going to stop. Okay? Then what they did is that counted leases in. And the reason why leases in were counted because lawyers and accountants can be very creative with doing something. And that's why the Act doesn't talk about ownership. It talks about land holdings and interest in land and so forth. So anyway, then there was a court case. Small-time processor made application to the court, and this matter was determined in the courts. And the court basically said that counting in leased land, yes, but you could be able to deduct out leased land going out. Okay, that's what the court said, the Court of Appeal, 3 judges said. But then in the 90s, the government of the day went and they passed a statute that said, no, what's going to be lands leased in or counted, leased out lands cannot be deducted. Now, I wasn't part of that decision. I wasn't involved in it. But I suspect that the reason was this. They were wanting to prohibit shams. So that if I have 100 acres and I lease it to my daughter out west, that it's really part of my operation, okay? And so sometimes when abuses have taken place, if you want to call it abuse, there's some drastic action is taken, and maybe there can be other solutions to that. Maybe what if that is going to be re-examined, then what it could be is someone would say that someone swears that the lease document is truly bona fide and that the lessee has truly got all control of it and has no involvement with the lessor and the over. I don't know. All I'm just trying to explain that that's sort of stuff that happens. And sometimes in my explanation, someone may conclude the Carver's supporting the status quo and this and that. I know I'm just trying to get the education out there so people understand it and can therefore give me their comments. Bertha.
Horace, just on the point that Denton raised, which
Yes.
is good points. In asking the question, I wonder how many farmers know that they have to report their leased land, and it's a good question. The other thing that I wanted to bring out is some farmers who find out that they should be reporting their leased land and do so, then find out that they unfortunately did not get permission to lease that land. So that's kind of the important piece that people need to know too, because that draws a fine as well.
Oh, yes, I know.
Yeah.
And I think
I
that,
know you know. I just
Yeah,
I know
sorry,
it's
Richard.
gonna cost money too. You make those mistakes.
the purpose of all that is, I'm very much against that. And we need to have a way to do commerce without all of this red tape. Those rented lands, a lot of them are to farmers that are retired. Ronnie was talking about it. Somebody comes in and rent his land, and he has a little bit of money to use. And he may rent it to whoever for 2 or 3 years, then maybe somebody else comes along and rents it. The farmer, no way ever has ownership on that, unless down the road he buys it. So it should not be considered a part of the Land Act at all. It should be, it's just commerce. It's something I need to use in order to do my rotation. I'm not going to own it unless I buy it. If I buy it, then it has to go through the procedure to do that.
Well,
why are we trying to control leased properties? Because there's no ownership.
I think, well, you see, this gets back to the point I was making a few moments ago, that the Act wasn't just simply to deal with ownership, because it had to deal with lease situation and other mechanisms to be able to get to the control of the land. And I think that's the purpose of I know that was the purpose in 82. I suspect that's what happened with the leased out stuff, that they felt there were abuses happening. All I'm just saying is maybe the lease out provision needs to be re-examined, will be re-examined, if the reason that it was put there in the first place was to prohibit abuse and trying for someone to get more than the allowable. If you have 100 acres that you lease in, Richard, and you want to lease out 100 acres, an awfully good argument can be made if you have to add it in, you should be able to take it off. But wouldn't the same condition about leasing out also apply to leasing in, which you have control of it? You have control of the 100 acres as long as you lease it. So when you lease it out, surely you have no longer control on that 100 acres. It's Bertha Campbell has control now.
Your rented land, you're talking about control of rented land. Rented land, you have control for 1 year or
Yes.
maybe a 3 year
Yes.
period, whatever
Yes.
it may be.
Yes.
Very seldom more than 3 years.
Right.
Then that land is gone. It's
Yes,
not-
that's right.
It's not, you don't control the land, basically you're using it as an asset to produce whatever. It's not anything to do with land ownership. I don't know why you want to, like, I know it's in the Act. The Act is the Bible of whatever, but we're going to change that.
Well, it's not the Ten Commandments, I can tell you that. I mean, like,
Well,
and
it's pretty close.
No, well-
Try not to be.
well, no, well, let's be fair now, because if it was the Bible and the Ten Commandments. I don't know why anyone made any changes in the past 30 years. There have been an awful lot of changes have been made over the 30 years, and I'm not convinced they have been made with looking at the overall. They have looked at it piecemeal, done this and done this, and so forth. Angus MacLean taught me, he said that no piece of legislation is perfect, and it doesn't mean it can't be changed. Maybe two negatives there, and I apologize for that.
So far in your meetings, how much talk has there been about land use, which probably should be forefront, front and center here in this discussion?
The chair of that particular task force is here this afternoon. He tells me before the meeting he's going to start public meetings in the month of April and May, and you can ask all those questions you want to him, except that I will say that in my first paragraph in terms of reference, I also have something to do with provincial land use, and the two seem to intertwine, and there's going to be some of that appear in my report as well. There's a lot of important questions there in land use, Peter.
Yeah. It seems that, with all due respect to our minister, our government just simply can't be trusted to make the right decisions in terms of...
Well, do you know what we're going to do? Like, Ronnie Henderson has got such a busy portfolio and responsibility, and he's taken some time out here this afternoon, and I can just tell by the twinkle in his eye that in about 5 minutes he has another commitment and he's going to leave.
Maybe not.
I think he's going to leave before the meeting's over.
Like we're allowing rotation, say, of potatoes and ryegrass with... this is an example of something government's done in the last couple of years, a rotation of potatoes and ryegrass, with the ryegrass plowed down in the fall, the land red 10 years out of 10 in the winter. But all of a sudden we need a 15-meter buffer zone on an alfalfa field at great cost to the alfalfa field owner, and probably one of the worst steps backwards you can make in terms of establishing a filter strip or a buffer zone. There was absolutely no scientific evidence whatsoever to that other than for political expediency at the time. And seems like we almost need a form of life higher than government to oversee the right and wrong of those situations.
I'm not sure that I could even find the right words to start to reply. All I know is this, guys. It's our island, it's our province. And how we deal with it and the stewardship we give to it is going to determine where we're going to be down the road. My wife is a Haligonian. We were married 40 years, and she's a retired nursing instructor. And ever since we came to this island, she has been so cautious at what we buy in supermarkets, and she looks at not the price. And those were days when I was making next to nothing as a young lawyer. She looks at where it's produced. Buys island, buys Canadian, American, and the other nations of the world doesn't get in the basket. And somewhere along the line we got to be prepared to pay more for what your farmers do and produce. And I don't know how you can do it or make it happen. But those of us that don't make our incomes from the land need to understand that, I got to be very candid with you, is that I'm a lawyer in Charlottetown, and I would starve if all my clients were from Charlottetown. I have very few clients from Charlottetown. My clients are from rural Prince Edward Island. And one of the things that has impressed me most recently was at the Federation of Agriculture. They brought somebody in, I forget his name, Lyman, I think, from
Lyndon Carlson.
Yes, yeah, from Farm Credit in Saskatoon. And it was a video that he presented about young farmers across this country and so forth, and their optimism in the future and how we need to sell it. And I just looked at today's paper before we left Charlottetown. The amount of space devoted to selling cars. We need to devote more money make more money available to farmers to sell their product and concept and support. And yes, Ronnie?
With regard to buying islands, I agree, it's great, you gotta support your own. But, and this little story come from a beef plant somewhere, and I just don't remember all the comments about it, but, you know, let's take Sobeys was sitting around the boardroom and Atlantic Beef Products offered them the meat for so much this week, and the fax comes in from Uruguay or Venezuela or whatever, it's a penny a pound cheaper. Where are they going to buy it? You know, they'll buy the cheaper stuff and put it on the shelf. And a lot of the consumers today, they can't afford, we can't afford the island stuff. We've got to buy the cheaper product. A lot of the consumers can't afford the top quality stuff that's produced in the island. And when you talk about buying local, can you still buy Stanfield's underwear? Is it made in Nova Scotia?
Show of hands. We'll have a show of hands.
But no, like it's the economy, and like our imports, our foreign imports can be so much cheaper because their pays is a lot less than what they are in North America.
The only point I'm making is that there may come a day that we would like to be able to pay for food, and we may have problems paying for it at any price. John.
Getting back to the question of land ownership, we hear there's a story about a religion setting up in the eastern end of the island where they're starting to buy land, and apparently, I hear this secondhand, their long-term goal is to send food back to the home country. I go back to your point about once corporate ownership is thrown wide open, it's going to be harder and harder for island farmers to be able to afford the land, I feel, because when I read reports about the cost of land in other areas, it's going up. And it's going up because of offshore companies are buying land because they see it as their long-term interest to control good agricultural land. Right now, pockets of land in PEI are too small to interest them. Later on, that may change.
So that could be the billions of dollars looking for a home that you talked about earlier.
Might be.
You know, just a small sample of it.
But even if we raise it for just the local island companies, if you permit me for a long rambling story, I'm a very small farmer. There are people in this room who don't consider me a farmer, I'm sure, because I own so little. And that's fair, I take that. I grew up, there was a lot of fellows my age or a little bit older that when I returned to the island, they were 150, there were 200, there were maybe 300-acre potato farmers. A lot of them aren't in business anymore. So the potato farmers who are in business are probably better farmers than I'll ever be, and they're better businessmen than I know I will be. So I have a lot of respect for them. They've had 15 to 20 years of abysmal business success because of the market and because of disease and whatever. However, I do look at what's going on in my own community, and there's a lot of farming now going on in the western end of the island, Tignish, that is from farms that are outside the Tignish area, because so many farms in our area have gotten out of business. And whether or not this is the cause of it, I'm seeing a lot of erosion going on now in my community. There's a lot of drift in the spring. There is an awful lot of soil ending up in the streams. If the farms get bigger, I don't think it's going to be a big rush of new young farmers entering to set up bigger farms. We're going to have to mechanize more because the margins are just going to go down. The field sizes are going to go up. And I think we're going to get more erosion. That's just my opinion. That's not a statement of fact. But we only have 5 or 6 or 3 in some instances 1 acre of topsoil left on our most valuable resource. Can the bigger farms farm in a way that has long-term neutral or beneficial effect? Especially now that our livestock industry has gotten so small. We can't put the fiber back into the soil. If we're looking at the long-term success of agriculture, will raising the threshold of land ownership be a long-term benefit? I personally, I have a lot of questions that I'd like to hear answered by people who are better farmers than I. And I don't mean to just ask that question today, but I don't understand how, I can understand in the short term how it will help enterprises, but I don't understand how in the long term that's going to help the farming sector, because I see the erosions. And the fields around me are small. The fields around me are fairly small. When you go down to the other areas east of us, or anywhere it's east of Tignish, the fields get bigger, and I see the problems getting bigger. And there's dust flowing around inside Summerside. So I
guess 2 or 3 quick things. One, if we could.
It's economy over environment. It's usually always the way.
Yeah. And that's not to paint it back to say that the bigger farmers are intentionally doing a bad job, or even if they are doing a bad job, but on an individual basis. But it's a fact of what they have to do, but I'm not sure whether that's in the long-term interest of the agricultural sector.
Well, I don't know anything about your farming operation, but I highly doubt that you're a poor farmer. I meant the way I think you meant the poor to be there.
I mean it different ways.
Yeah. I don't intend to ask any questions to your meetings. Probably won't even be going to any of your meetings, but I'm very much glad to have you here. I asked something similar at one of the couple of other meetings, and that is, I'm really hoping that whether it's the Federation or wherever it is, the individual farmers, that I'm going to receive some data that's going to address this whole matter of larger. Does it mean better? Is it required? Some numbers, some facts, and how it's going to affect and what are the spin-off effects. Some of this stuff cannot be gotten wrong. And you started with a preamble there that I'm not going to get back into too much to say, but I think it would not be a good day for Prince Edward Island if land is traded in this province as it was on the Toronto stock market or the New York stock market. I don't think we yet have been faced with what wealth can really do in the acquisition of land in this province. There is a distinct difference, guys, between what pride of place brings to individuals that are part of a community of an economic base in this economic and social base in this province, contributing to our overall communities, than simply saying you are an owner of the land. There are distinct differences of mindsets on that particular point. Richard?
I'd like to comment on the youth idea. The best we can hope to do is maintain, I think, in the position we find ourselves. It's almost impossible for young people just to come out of wherever and start a farm today. It's quite a challenge. It's a huge challenge even to maintain the young people that are growing up in the farms. And that's my concern. If we can even maintain some of the farms that we have today, we're losing farms every day. It's unbelievable. In 1990, we were part of a group, and there were 55 growers in that group. a couple of sit down, recently in Canada, there's 14 left. Of that 55 is already gone. We're in a serious situation with BI and probably in Canada when it comes to food production. And like, whatever we have to do to make it so we can survive, we gotta do that. First thing is survival, the second thing will be to do the best job we can. And we're being pushed every day to produce higher and higher numbers in order to maintain that. So we have to come up with ways and means, and we're always looking at better practices and these things to try and bring back a better living. But when it comes to young people, the young people that grow up on the farm, most of them have been trained and they know how to farm, but we're losing those people. It's difficult for someone who has no farm upbringing to swing into the farm and make it work today with the high costs. But like I said, I don't know many things are more risky.
Well, I'm a farmer's son, and the other side of the family are farmers and fishermen. My folks came here, my people came here after the American Revolution. They lost and came north in 1783. And except for one guy in the 1830s who fished for a little bit as sea captain, he spent the great majority of his life as a tenant farmer when he 50 to 60 years. So from 1783, Richard, down to now, they've all been a line of farmers. I'm the first non-farmer. I'm the oldest of 5 boys, and not one of us are farming. They've left the province. I'm the only one here. Okay?
Yeah, and that's what we have happening. Right?
Now, this is what I want to do. We've never done this before, but this is what we're going to call quick snappers. And Robbie, I'm going to ask you to leave. Because I'm not trying to embarrass you, I'm not being difficult on you and so forth. But what I'm going to ask...
Before you do the quick snappers.
Yeah, okay.
I'm glad that gentleman...
John Handerhan?
Pardon me?
John Handerhan?
John Handerhan from Karen Hill. I'm glad he brought up the topic of erosion, because I've been here for an hour and a half or more, and I was getting scared by the minute.
Why?
Well, I should have come here. I'm in the wrong meeting. I'm in a room full of bitching farmers here.
No.
I am on the board of directors of a watershed group.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to hear the word erosion, because I've been hearing farmers don't like government people on their land, and I'm glad Robbie's here. Farmers don't trust government. Farmers they're getting less and less say in what they can do. You didn't say that, did you?
Yes, I did. No offense taken.
This is a meeting about land use.
So this is a meeting
No,
of
the Land Act.
Land Act.
But
Land use
overall,
meeting,
it
not
all
the land use meeting.
in the end, though, it all flows down to the water stream.
Well, it's just like the Guardian said the other day. Land is important and water is important. Somebody said earlier that land is the most important thing. I think we've got 3 important things in this province, and perhaps even more. Water, land, and people. And we have to be careful that we don't isolate so much. John Handerhan has been working in his group since last August. We're going to be having meetings in April. We had Armand DeRoche's commission to deal with nitrates. And there's this particular commission. There's more commissions going to probably happen to deal with water. You haven't read my report yet, but water is going to be mentioned, even if it's not quite as voluminous as some people want. But people are expressing their opinions, just like you're expressing your opinion. And this process will not succeed if people feel hampered in expressing their honest opinions. And that's why I have been encouraging their honest opinions, because I can't create solutions unless I have a sense of the people with their problems. I'm so thankful for water. Okay? I really am. But we need to understand that it's a complicated web in which we live.
But
Just what I want to hear, she's not finished yet.
I guess I'm wondering what it is then that farmers want. Do they want it wide open, no regulations?
There's different spread of opinions, but you haven't been at our other meetings, and I appreciate you coming this afternoon. And one of the things that I came away with from a meeting that we held in Montague, which was our third, now it's our fourth, is that even some farmers that would like to see a change in limits have come to publicly said and have said to me privately, I'd like some further expansion here in the limits, but it can't be wide open. We need some protection. We need this, but we have to have that. And one of the things I'm trying, and I may fall so flat in my face that it wouldn't even be funny, but I want people to know what other people are saying and understand the shoes in which they walk, in which they talk. Okay? And the reason why I'm trying to explore this red tape stuff so much and everything else, it may be possible. It may be possible to achieve different ends here, common ends, if we can build upon certain things. And I'm not naive enough to know that this is an easy process. I'll stop my response with one little example I've given elsewhere. You weren't at those. And shortly after I was appointed, my wife and I went to Province House. There was a reception for Dr. David Sassoon. A couple of hundred people there. And people were running over to me this way and that way and making opinions known, giving me their calling cards and everything else. And my wife and I left when the reception was over and walked down the street, and she says, "Dear," she says, "everyone has an opinion on the land question." I said, "That's right." And she says, "Not many of them agree with each other." Okay? So what I'm trying to... Are you leaving here?
Yes, I'm leaving because Robbie has to leave. No, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you for your initial question. It was very helpful.
I'll be seeing Robbie before you're out there.
Okay. But we have become... On this issue, I'm going to rephrase it, 20 years ago, in reports that were given to the legislature, and a legislative committee report, there was an awful lot more unanimity out there in the agricultural community than exists today. Okay? And I just think that we need to find ways to have diverse opinions and to build upon our strength and our commitment as a whole in this community and in this province. And if we can't do that, things aren't going to go so well down the road.
The ALICE program is a pretty good program. Farmers must trust government on that.
Well, actually, they don't.
Oh dear.
Can I throw a comment in here?
Sure.
It's been presumed, I think, what everybody is blaming erosion on potato farmers and row cropping and all that. Well, if there's an increase in the land, in the ability, or increase in the acreage for people to buy land, there's not going to be any less acres of land cultivated. The same amount is going to be cultivated. And they may be, if they own it, there may be more care. I'm not saying they're not taking care of it, but there may be more care taken of it. If they own it, and they can control it better, control the buffer zones, than if they rented it. And that's just an observation, just
That would
a
be
thought.
good if that happened.
The ALICE program, well, it gives you a few more meters.
And some money in your pocket.
Not very much.
I get
Some no.
I get $200 a year. But I don't have a lot of land issues.
Now, before Peter and Robbie go, and I just want to explain, no, I really do. I just want to explain to Robbie why I want him to go, because we're going to do some quick snappers. One of the things that I would like to hear from people, I've been thinking about this a lot, is there seems to me that there may be an opportunity here to be creative with some of the things we may do with our tax laws. And we may be able to do certain things revenue-wise. We may be given certain credits or create something new and things like that to help and do certain things out there. And I just would really like that this group could be able to have the freedom to do that without having to administer a crown here. And I am not in any way being critical of you, fine admiration of your father, got along, and I'm so supportive of some of the things you're doing in tourism, particularly in the music scene. Our son is at work in music PI, and he tells me the support you give is terrific. It's just I need to have a little bit of time here with these folks that they can give some specific examples that I don't have a Minister Crown sitting here.
That's fine. With any care you've done, I guess, before that, you said, before I leave, you had some statements.
Yeah,
so
and she was...
You're done? Well, that's what I was waiting for.
Other than to say, I'm not here to change for Ryan. So,
No.
what he said.
Oh, he's an okay guy.
He's an okay dad.
He's not promoting
We're
anything.
just here as neighbors, you know.
Neighbors and friends all working through. Okay.
But I would.
But I guess really though, I mean, we're talking here about two aspects. You're talking about, I don't know many farmer who doesn't want to turn over to the next generation the land and the air and the water better than what he received it. But I also don't know any farmer that doesn't want to feed and educate his kids. And so that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about being able to farm and feed and educate your children. And if there's a choice between protecting the environment and feeding and educating your children, the choice is feeding and educating your children. And that's the problem. I mean, so it's an economic problem that I don't know how we solve outside the. I know how we can solve it within our organization, within supply management, is that we have a long-term stability. But outside that, I don't know what the potato guys and the beef guys, their options were.
When I went to Dow in 1968, you could barely see across the side of the classroom or outside in restaurants or everything else with the level of smoke we had. Okay? And in 1.5 generations, we got people educated not to smoke. Okay? Now your colleague is doing some great stuff there with drinking and driving and all that type of stuff. Okay? And as I said before, Ron, look at all that in today's Guardian. You just count it, and I looked at the Halifax Herald today as well, the number of car ads and everything else. Well, maybe we need to put some ads in there and doing certain things so farmers being paid. You guys need to be paid more. In our household for years, because of my wife taking leadership in this, we have done it, whatever, and we need to do more steps along that line. And now in a few minutes, you're going to tell me some examples, which we've never done before, going to quick snappers of how some specific examples you think this government, any government, can help in the revenue side and doing some things.
Okay, with that. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody for coming out here today too. So I guess my rational reason why I wasn't speaking at all on this was I wanted to hear the views of my constituents as it pertains to that. And I think Karen's point that I've always sort of said, we're all in this province together. We all are part of the solution as much as we're part of the problem. So I think I would have liked to have seen more watershed groups here probably, but I do see some people that are farmers that are on the watershed group. So I think, to say that there's only one person that's not a farmer here, per se, is a little false, because there are a number. I see Jonathan and people that are on the watershed group. So that's all good. So with that, I look to...
I'm going to be Summerside, Wellington, and Alton.
Well, I'm just dealing with the area, and that's my constituency. Anyway, we look forward to the recommendations and all of that.
Thanks, Rob. Okay. I'd like to have a whole bunch of different suggestions and ideas what you think government can do to make it easier or helpful in certain areas. And I'm not being critical of any government, and I've said this before. I don't think I've said it publicly, but what could this province do if we were able to have 10% of the monies we pay every year as interest in provincial debt? Okay. If we had that available to do certain things in this whole area of farming and land and all that type of stuff, we pay interest and the interest leaves the province. It's gone. We never see it again. It's not spent here. Okay. So what are some specific changes in financial policies that would advantageously be advantageous to you folks in the farming community or others who think that would be helpful, whether we're dealing with watersheds or whatever it is? Someone want to start that? You think that shouldn't be a topic for conversation? You can tell me that too.
Greg and I were on a committee this year that looked at the fish kill down the road here a little while, last summer. And one of the suggestions that we had made, or the committee had made, was that some money be available every year to buy sensitive land from farmers at market price. So that if there's land that runs along the shore, that land simply be purchased by the province, becomes crown land, and then that takes some of that sensitive land, and then the farmer's allowed to, use that money to offset and buy another parcel. I think is that captured it, Greg? Sort of. That was one suggestion from that committee. The other thing was to look at a pilot project to help pay farmers to build organic matter. Was another suggestion from that report.
Could you just elaborate on the last point a little bit? Because the first one has already sort of creeped into my mind in a draft analysis of what might be in the report.
We're having challenges because of the lack of livestock now. A lot of farmers had livestock over the years, and they were able to use the manure from the livestock to help maintain the soil.
I'm sorry to pick that up a little bit. There was a letter in the other day, I think, about that or something like that. John, how is that? How can that happen? What would the mechanism be to build up the organic matter?
Well, if there was some talk about fall rye, and there's things there that can build organic matter, but they're not as easily seen as using manure. So and you have to try and figure out what fits for each farm. I'm not sure if we get into it a whole lot, did we, Greg? Other than
specific means.
Yeah, we didn't get into the specific means, and I think it's a challenge for farmers because of the lack of livestock to try to build. So we need some work on how to do that. We're not going to turn back the clock and have cattle on every farm, or we're not going to have pigs in every farm. So we have to. So we can get some scientific assistance on that.
Okay, thank you. Others? Ron, what would you say? What would be some financial situations that would be helpful that you'd like to see happen to help the farming community, thereby helping rural Prince Edward?
Well, I guess one aspect is that this HST coming into effect is the first step. The other aspect of it is the potato industry is controlled by one individual here in Prince Edward Island. Convince that individual that we've got to maintain our environment in a sustainable way. And that's what they should be selling to their customers.
Do you want a wish list?
That's what I'm asking for.
Just, if I could speak before Richard there.
Yes,
That's
a rather
nod. We'll just keep on going down the line here. In relation to the building of organic matter,
yes.
Like, even though we're losing like the pork and the beef and everything else, we still have dairy, but even though we put organic material in our land, it takes it 10 years to become organic matter. So the profile of our land takes a long time to change or improve. So we have to be, we all are stewards of our land, and there's many different ways that we can probably examine that, and it may also be around some of the uses of fertilizers that we're using. There's places in the world that they don't have access to any fertilizers, but yet they still grow crops. And it's because of the understanding of soil health and rhizomes and different things that integrate with the plant so that it naturally achieves what it has to have to grow crops. So there's a whole...
I'm not sure I fully understand all of that, but...
Soil science. There's a whole science behind what basically happens there. So even though we mentioned that, it's great to give credits if you can increase your organic matter, and there's ways to slowly do that, it's just not going to happen like that overnight.
Perhaps you take a calling card and send me a note on that, would you please?
Denton. It's Denton, not Richard.
No, that's...
sorry.
Ronnie, just...
Okay.
Richard?
Well, just on the wish list, talk about an industry like the dairy industry, that they have a quota system which helps them a little bit.
Yeah,
But most everything else doesn't.
yeah.
And one thing we pushed for many years with government is, like, we buy crop insurance. Buy-
Wise.
You have crop insurance and it only pays 80% of your costs.
Mhm.
So if we had crop insurance, we could purchase it that would cover costs. Then the economics of that is that you don't, years where you don't have rain, you don't drop 20 or 30% in your income. But you can't get that across, the importance of that.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it gives you license to farm. It means that you
It
just
means you
don't-
survived for another day.
Yeah,
Okay.
survive to hopefully you make a profit. But that requires, because of third, it requires dollars from the province and quite a few dollars to do that. But what that would do would strengthen the industry so that they could survive.
Okay. You were the first person to come. You and I had a little chat beforehand, and I asked you if you're going to say anything this afternoon. You said no, but
I
you,
didn't stay with my word.
that's fine, Richard. I always love to hear from you. Give me some more examples.
Well, that understood that.
No, I want one more.
Let somebody else talk back to me.
All right, Ronnie?
Cost of production, like we talk about the animals on the farms. The animals aren't there because we haven't been able to get the costs out of it. And like plant science, I'm not totally convinced that Roundup doesn't have an issue with soil erosion. Yes, it's good in its places and sometimes it has to be used, but plant science. But the biggest factor is to get paid for what we do, and it's always been said if the farmer makes money, they'll spend it. Whether it be hiring extra help, buying Canadian manufactured vehicles as opposed to offshore, farmers will do it.
Okay. Mary, you must have some thoughts. You attend all these meetings.
I think one thing I've heard over and over in the last year or so is how disheartening it is to see the provincial and federal cuts in agricultural research. And listening to what Denton and Richard have said, we rely on private enterprise now to do that and to present us with what we hope are unbiased results, which will in turn affect how we choose to buy products. I think in order to do a better service and better equip our farmers, who we don't realize have to be experts in human resources, have to be mechanics, have to be soil stewards, have to be IRAC experts, have to be, and the list goes on. We also expect these people to be very much up on, their beneficial microbials and how Roundup might chelate manganese and whatever you have. I think our province needs to make investments in getting good information to our farmers. We need trials. We need local data that actually means something. And we don't need it from a biased private company. We need it from someone who cares about our resource.
And you feel that farmers are wanting that and needing that?
I do.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's what I hear.
Okay. Thank you. Now this gentleman, I let you off early by saying no comments in the front row, but are you able to help us with specific suggestions that you think government could do, maybe changes in policies, taxes, whatever that might be helpful here to farmers?
Well, for me, I just watch the infrastructure that we used to have disappearing.
Okay.
Like, you're not going to have a beef industry or a pork industry or even a potato industry. Like, we used to have killing plants local. We used to have them in Summerside. We used to be able to kill hogs on the island. We used to grade a lot of potatoes in Malaria. There was a lot of employment. I don't think there's very many potatoes being graded in Malaria and shipped anywhere. It seems like we're losing the infrastructure. If you don't have a contract, which is the same as a quota as far as I'm concerned, only it's controlled by a large corporation that try to fill a market that they think they can fill. So infrastructure to me is a very important thing. And we talk about land and fertilizer and things like that. We used to have a club that was funded by government that had an agrologist on it, and he came and he did
I'm
soil.
sorry, when you said, what's your first name?
Kim.
Kim. What club is this?
Well, it was the soils. There was three of them on the island,
Okay.
and it was a club where farmers got together, and we got this fellow helped us with our fertilizer and everything like that, and then government money dried up for it. And
I'm not familiar with that.
went to water stream groups, stream enhancement groups, who to me are non-farmers who want to tell farmers what to do. So, but those are some of the things that I see. I wouldn't mind seeing the clubs reintroduced again.
Well, maybe you could have the club back and have the Walker Street have its money too, would you? Karen?
Whoa.
No, just briefly.
Oh, just briefly?
Yes, just briefly.
Hi, Kim.
Yeah, they care.
Do you guys know each other?
Well, if I might add,
Sure.
Sorry, Kim. Like, back when there was a lot of federal provincial programs, cost sharing the feds, we had a lot of money coming in from federal programs. We had the Soils and Crops group, and there's still the PEI Soils and Crops, but it used to be the West Princeton and however many more. And that was just one. And I mean, the farmers themselves, Reynold McNeil was the major coordinator, and he was one of these fellows that had the idea that it was a lot better to take the products out to the farm and grow it as opposed to growing it in the research station in Charlottetown in a controlled environment. You get more accurate results if they were grown there. And Kim's father was one of the main, was a big promoter and very active in that all over the years, along with a lot of other farmers. And it brought a lot of these new products and farming practices and building design ideas, brought a lot of that to little old West Prince, and the farmers benefited from it. And
that's not the clubs I'm talking about.
Oh, you were just talking about the last ones?
Yes.
The Agricultural Conservation Club?
Yes.
Well, which was kind of a spin-off of that.
Well,
but anyway, it was an assistance from government to help the farmer address these issues, and funding is dried up.
Okay,
To sum that up is
Sorry.
education, ongoing gathering of information and education. I mean, everybody, we all need to be growing our skill set, right? So, and I think speaking to Mary's point there about it's research and development, is that what you call it, Richard and Denton? And in a sense, can the private individual farmer afford to do that? And should they be the one bearing the financial risk of doing that? Because the end goal is a healthier environment, which is going to create a healthier social economic status for our province. So everyone in the province is going to benefit from it. So there should be a sharing of that as well.
That's what I'm trying to have you talk about sharing the revenues that come from everybody else. Karen? Because we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm not going to be... let me put it this way. You carry on, and I want to hear a few more from some people over here that perhaps haven't spoken yet.
I'll be very brief.
No, you're fine. Carry on.
We just have to work together. The water and the land are separate on this island. If someone feels that the watershed groups are just trying to tell farmers what to do, no, we're asking to please watch what you do.
Well, the last round of rules and regulations, and they don't affect me to any amount at all. I'm a dairy farmer, I don't grow row crops, but as I drove around the country, I watched berms being erected, waterways appearing everywhere, grass waterways, things going on that hadn't gone on, and then the first thing we turned around, and we got a whole new group of rules and regulations imposed on us as a reward for having already done that, as near as I could tell. Farming wasn't consulted. We were invited to some meetings, and told about the new regulations. And Peter, who happens to know Karen pretty well, was greatly affected by these rules and regulations on his hayfields.
Some buffer zones.
On the buffer zones. It was the buffer zones that were brought in.
Everyone's treated the same way. I think that's a point that probably should be made.
No, I'm just saying that
people that would have lower instances of any erosion would be your pasture fields, your hay fields, and they're treated the same way as a row crop field would be treated. I think there is some people are a little bit disconcerted on that in the last
Yeah. I'm probably going to need some education.
And maybe one size doesn't fit all of the buffer zone thing.
Well, I mean, it just appeared to agriculture out of the blue. That's all I'm saying. And to me, the watershed committees were the ones that were instigating it.
Okay. Now, folks over here, some of you have been very quiet, and there's nothing wrong with that, not at all. But do you have any thoughts or observations you'd like to make?
No.
I know I spoke to you a little bit before, and I got some of your observations and thoughts. Okay, the gentleman beside Greg with the...
I agree with Ronnie. If we were getting paid more for what we do, things go a whole lot simpler. One thing about comparing red ground over the winter to a hay field, basically a spring plowed field is going to cost an awful lot more through the growing potato season to deal with. And harvest would be, on a wet year, your harvest cost would double. So if we were selling our product and making enough money to overcome that cost, well, fair game. I wouldn't mind doing it at all. I think it's, my opinion is we're all downstream of somebody. So these ag conservation groups, our farm was involved in it. At first, when they said they were going to be tied to a watershed, that excited me because most of our farm is tied to one watershed, but our watershed wasn't put as part of, the money didn't go to it. We have a small watershed group, but we do what we can. But there was an opportunity for the Cows and Fish Project where the brooks were going to be walked on both sides, and a rating of the riparian zone was going to be put on that area. So that didn't really it give a score to the brook, but it also gave a score to the area between the brook and the field. So it was going to tell if this field had any impact on the brook at all. Now, with the field we own in the brook, I know there's fields that have a big impact on the brook. There's fields that have no impact. But it takes a lot of walking through the woods to sort out which ones are which. And I guess at the end, I don't want to have to do more work than I need to. Growing more acres to make more profit doesn't appeal to me whatsoever, because it's more work, but it's the nature of the beast that I'm involved in. But more paperwork. If dealing with Iraq was the only thing I had to do, that'd be great. But we have to deal with CFIA, we're seed growers. We have to deal with all our on-farm food safety stuff. We have to deal, all this, everything has got to be done by us. So all this paperwork gets to be pretty daunting.
So you're in potatoes, are you?
Yes.
Okay. What's your name?
Jonathan McClendon.
Okay. I think I know your folks, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Most people either know my folks or my sister.
I don't know your sister. Okay. Earlier on, I heard somebody say something about perhaps government could buy some sensitive lands around water or the shore, or wetlands, or something like that, and so forth. What would you think if there was a suggestion that over a period of time, the government would have a rather directed policy of doing something like that? That could include buying the land. It could also include that maybe the farmer would continue owning the land but give up certain rights of development along it so that it might protect certain viewscapes and landscapes and certain things like this, but there would be some capital come in to the farmer either from government or from a third party like a charitable organization and so forth that was interested in something like that. I am trying awful hard to get people to come up with creative suggestions and so forth. I really do, and I hope nobody misunderstands why I asked Robert Henderson to leave. It's just that right now this is the type of stuff that I just don't think a member of Executive Council needs to see or hear until some of it appears in my report.
That is a practice that another, like in the state of Maine, I'm not sure what it's called, the land bank or whatever, that is available there, where the property owner would retain, the person that has that land can retain ownership, but the agreement is that it's taken out of production for a period of time. I know what John was referring to with the Barclay Brook situation here was that some of the growers in that area that we talked to, the suggestion was, well, that's a piece of land that perhaps I'd just assume not be farming or shouldn't be farming. That perhaps because of limitations or restrictions with the Land Protection Act and their operation, they are farming. So if that was an option, they could take it out of production or and get compensated. Or in the cases we dealt with, they said if somebody would just buy it from me or the government would buy it, then I can take the money and buy good land, let's say.
Yeah,
so
exactly, great.
Yeah.
So this problem is so unique when it comes. We had very little crown land, very little crown land, even compared to New Brunswick or even Nova Scotia, for example. Okay, and we would have probably less crown land today than we did in the 70s when the Land Development Corporation existed and so forth.
Can I add a quick snapper?
Sure. No, there were two people I was going to zero in before the end of your word because you've been patient.
It was just, I was just listening. And you mentioned earlier the communication piece.
Yeah.
That's something I think government is, because again, well, I don't know what the most recent statistics are, less than 5% perhaps of our population are involved in agriculture. I work for them, and I don't think there's anybody, in my opinion, that cares more about the land than they do. And I think they're the best people that should be responsible for the proper, or looking after the land. But and I heard you say it, and often what's happened with government is because of public misunderstanding or not understanding the situation, economic situation, or agriculture, let's say, is rules are put in place to appease public perception, as opposed to making good environmental sense in many cases and economic sense. And I would say today in agriculture, whether it's Cavendish Farms or any farm operation, we have to have two objectives. One is to make money. We have to be profitable. At the same time, we have to improve or preserve and improve the environment. That's just, I think today that's a given. But I think the communication part, I think that's something that government could help with. And as far as the research, I agree wholeheartedly. Probably even more important is technology transfer. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of research that's been done, but again, it's been very difficult there's a lot of opportunity for that to be trialed on a commercial basis, and to make sure that works. So, technology transfer. What else? Things like, I'll say, I guess that's not part of the land. I was going to say things like water, you mentioned. We're only using, I think, recently about 7% of that resource on PEI. We had a 1-year moratorium on deep water wells, and that was put in place 10 years ago. And why I bring that up is that's a resource. And maybe that's off topic.
I'd say you're off, but anyway.
Yeah, that again, and I'll go back. Maybe I'll bring it around to profitability and competitiveness. We are competing in agriculture in a global economy. We're competing on the potato side of things with Western Canada, Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, big potato growing areas that are getting twice the yields that we're getting. Our trend line yields on PEI have been decreasing. So again, I think that there's many growers that under the current regulations having increasing the limits would allow them to have better practices, better rotation, better stewardship, and at the same time improving yields. So that would improve their profitability and their competitiveness with other areas.
Well, you were in Montague the other night.
Yep.
And the gentleman behind you in the white sweater, he said in regard, yeah. You probably even traveled the roads together. But John Jamieson said, as a result of a query that was posed to me by Neil McDonald from the front row of crop rotation, that he thought that was probably maybe the Crop Rotation Act was honored by about 75%. Okay, and when we're in school, 75% wasn't a bad mark.
It was fast.
Yeah, it was fast. But 25% not adhering to it. Like I try to travel to these meetings alone because I like to think before and when I leave. And I got thinking about some comments from Montague, and I said, I really appreciate John Jameson being so candid and so honest in that 75%. But 25% not honoring it, that's not good. The gentleman in the back with the sunglasses, would you like to say anything? You've been very patient, you're listening there.
No, I'm good.
You're good, okay.
Can I have one other quick snapper?
Yes, Greg.
This is a safety net program. I think I heard somebody mention it.
Yeah.
And our government, during the last election, made a commitment, for example, of spending an additional $2 million. They also said they're going to balance the budget, by the way. But they said they were going to spend, on the same time, an additional $2 million on crop insurance on PEI.
Yes.
And since that time, they've spent less. And currently, I think they're debating about pulling back quite a lot on the production insurance. And that's an important part of growers, the stability and to help them, give them protection from risk and whatnot. And that's an important part of this as well. If the province pulls back on that sort of thing, then it makes it more difficult to comply with again, what they want to with good stewardship and land management. And one other quick one I'll say too is on the soil conservation side of things, the terraces, the berms and waterways. For example, in that project, we found that that fund was exhausted actually. So one of our recommendations was more emphasis on implementation of good soil conservation practices. Again, the mapping out the farms in an effort to, bottom line, when we have heavy rainfalls, the water has to go somewhere but to keep the soil in the fields. There's a fund there that helps farmers to map out their fields and put in the proper terraces.
That's provincial dollars, is it correct?
Provincial, yeah. And for example, that was one of the recommendations, that fund was fully utilized. So there's an opportunity there for your question to put more resources towards initiatives like that. And then the other one that I heard somebody mention too, I think it was at Montague, was some sort of reward or incentive or credits for good rotation, good practices. And I think that's along the lines of your hand.
I already heard that. It's marked down.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Bertha, you've been very patient.
No, that's the only thing I was going to mention because the people here wouldn't have heard it, but it was mentioned by Anthony Neighbours in the Montague area that we really need to have some kind of an incentive, a tax credit or something for people that rent their land to farmers and it's a long rotation, or farmers themselves use long rotations. Just some kind of a way to reward good behavior.
And as Anthony said in that point, he said, if I know I have a parcel of land for 6 years, I can make investments in that parcel I wouldn't make on a shorter term lease. So if I can have that security, I know I'm going to put more money into it, make more money, and in turn I'll be able to pay a better rent rate.
Thank you. The gentleman who's been sitting beside me all day is Patrick Carroll. Forgot to introduce him. He's my scribe. He's with the Municipal Affairs Department, but I seconded him for 6 months, and immaterial where he gets his paycheck, he takes his direction from me. And I want to thank you. I just want to say a couple of things. I'm very appreciative of the candor. I've tried to introduce myself to everyone before the meeting that was here before the meeting. I'll linger around afterwards and speak to you as well. I am trying very hard to, and those of you who have attended all these meetings may have seen a little bit of a shift in today's meeting a little bit. That's because I am wanting to get into some certain specifics, and I thought it was the right atmosphere of the afternoon to do it. I may have told some stories, and some of my answers may be a little longer, but I can assure you that there was a purpose in all my questions and comments trying to solicit from you your comments and whatever. I hope you don't have overly high expectations in one sense, but you can be assured that I know how to listen to your comments. They will be carefully considered, and I will be making a rather comprehensive report to government. And I can tell you that I will be on some other occasion asking for quick snappers, and some of those quick snappers are going to find themselves in the report. Denton.
Just one question. Looking at your map here on the corporate ownership of the properties.
Yes.
I'd just like a clarification. It says over 26,000 corporate owned properties, of which it represents 155,980 acres.
Yes.
We do the division on that at 17.91 acres. Is that a misprint, or what percentage of those corporations actually have anything to do with agriculture?
That is a question that somebody else has asked. In fact, it was asked in Morel, and it's not as easy to get the answer as you might think.
Because I look at that and I say it doesn't really represent anything in relation to agriculture or what we're trying to do today.
Yeah. And that I understand, but you also have to appreciate that this review that's going on isn't just isolated to some of the topics we talked about here today. It also has to do non-resident ownership and corporate tithing and so forth. The question that you just asked was asked in Morel, and it is not nearly as simple to get as you might think. It really isn't, and we're working on it, and I don't even know whether it's going to be possible to obtain an answer. But I hear you loud and clear. It all has to do, in many ways, with whether the land, this parcel, is agriculture used or not. It's a very difficult answer. And I have a strong suspicion my report will be finished and not be able to give a complete answer on it. One of the things that IRAC hasn't done in the last 8 or 9 years, they have stopped making certain reports and analysis available, and I think it's fair to say that there will be suggestions in the future that certain information be provided and made available and so forth. But I'm sorry if that seems vague, but I can't give any more than that. Greg?
I think John the guy in the white shirt, made a really good comment as well at the last meeting, is that with the folks there, that as far as the farms, most of those corporations are family farms.
Oh yeah, and no question about that.
That's a very good point.
No question, because that gets back to what we were talking before. We spent a long time talking about it today, about the... There's no question about that. There's no question about that. Thank you for coming. Look forward to seeing as many of you as you like at other meetings, and appreciate your candor and attentiveness.